Hello, what is up YouTube? This is Ben Smith from BS Ratings, and 2020, what felt like the longest year ever, just ended. Which means, if you remember last year, this means that we must go through the top 10 films of the past year. So let's get started. But first, I'm going to go through a little bit of what happened in the entertainment industry during 2020. Earlier I said that 2020 felt like one of the longest years ever, and that's because of the coronavirus and murder hornets and the election year and a whole bunch of shit that was terrible. And one of those things, COVID, shut down the movie theaters. And with the rise of streaming going on at the same time, this brought a new era of films this year, because it seems now that this year streaming movies seem to be taking over the movie industry, because theaters weren't there, so we had less big blockbuster films, and there are more movies that you just watch on streaming networks. Like this past Christmas, 2 movies came out, one on Disney Plus, that being Soul, and one on HBO Max, that being Wonder Woman 84. Those were 2 fairly successful movies, I would say, and they were on 2 very new streaming services, both by private companies too. Yeah, they're all private companies, but what I mean is like individual film companies, not like Netflix, for example, which just has random stuff. It's just Disney movies and Warner Media movies, so. And, well, basically, this led to what seems to be the death to theaters. We probably still have theaters for a while after this, but the truth is they are go closer to their fall than their rise. And our streaming services are growing in the meantime, and it seems like you will be getting them a lot more successful movies coming to streaming services in the near future. Which is one of the reasons why I am choosing not to wear a movie shirt today. I decided to wear a Mandalorian shirt because this is a TV show on a streaming service that I mentioned earlier, Disney Plus. But now to get to what you all been waiting for, is my top 10 ranking. And at the bottom of my list for the top 10 is Project Power, which was a Netflix movie. And this really shows the growth of streaming services, because normally a Netflix movie just be lower down the list because primarily they're low budget, but however, theater movies are going down, and so that brings up more popularity and more reason to watch movies on streaming services. And so Project Power actually had a very good cast. It had, of course, Jamie Foxx and Joseph Gordon-Levitt as starring roles. And the concept of this movie was fairly similar yet very different at the same time. It was kind of a drug cartel type movie, but also a superhero movie at the same time, which was very interesting because we got to see a drug that would give people superpowers for 1 hour. The catch is that some people will just explode when they take them because their body can't handle it. And we see Joseph Gordon-Levitt and Jamie Foxx's characters. They're both trying to fight against this drug, yet they both have taken it. and it's very interesting, especially since Jamie Foxx's character is actually having a strong, feelable motive in his doings. And because this is true, because his daughter is being held captive because she is the only natural born with these powers, because her dad was the experiment. Jamie Foxx's character was the experiment for these drugs, and his daughter ended up having her own powers by birth. And so I really recommend this movie. If you haven't seen it, I would check it out soon. And so I would like to give a spoiler warning. I know I already gave one of my picks already, but just spoilers. Keep that in mind. Okay. Now, number 9 brings us to The Call of the Wild, which was starring Harrison Ford, a fantastic actor. And it was based off of a very well-known book that shows the story of a dog slaying dog, which is not something you typically really be interested in unless you really like dogs, which I understand is most people actually. But it's very interesting. You get to see the process is going through all this lawn area and meeting and experiencing all of these random people, and it all just fits together in one whole big story. And you get to see the real struggle of a big dog going through it on dog sledding. But in the end, he ends up being the leader of his dog sled. Not really the end, but eventually he does. And if you like adventure movies, I recommend this 100%. But moving on, I'm going to go to my number 8 pick, which is Wonder Woman 84. This is one of the movies I mentioned earlier that came out just this past Christmas, and this is also the newest DC film we've gotten. And it was supposed to come back around 4th of July, is my understanding, but because of the theater shutdown, they delayed it, and they decided to just put it on HBO Max and put it in the theaters, which I ended up watching on HBO Max. And this movie was very interesting in the way that it perceived the way of having 2 villains. We didn't really have a main villain and another main villain. We didn't really have another main villain and an underling villain, is what I meant to say. But we had 2 main villains, and it just happened that they worked together properly, and the kind of defeat of the first villain led on to a more epic defeat of the second villain. And the first villain, of course, being Cheetah, and the second villain, of course, being Maxwell Lord. And they all connect because this is mostly a story about letting go and moving on, which I don't know how much you guys know about me in real life, but this was really perfect for the timing of what was going on in my life recently, and the fact that I just lost several people in my life, and we get to see Wonder Woman get another chance to spend time with the love of her life, Steve Trevor, and she comes to the conclusion that she has to let him go, and she has no choice, which was very heartbreaking and very well done scene. But she had to do it, and it was just great for the meaning of the story of how important it is to let go and keep moving forward. And we had Cheetah, the main villain. She just wanted to be noticed, and people to actually care about her, and be able to fight back when someone goes after her, and she got it for wishing to be like Diana. And so this all led to a big old brawl with Diana and Cheetah, of course, in the end. And it was a very interesting scene, and it was kind of dark, I have to say. It was really dark scene, dark with the lighting is what I mean, which I didn't really like that much, but it fit well with what happened next, which was wasn't really a fight scene, but I'm gonna call it the main fight scene, which was Wonder Woman versus Maxwell Lord, because Maxwell Lord, during this entire movie, he's going through dealing with these powers, and he gets to grant people's wish, but with a catch. And his catch for his wish of being able to do that is his health is going into deep shit. That's pretty much the only way to say that. And he has a son that he's neglected, even though he truly loves his son, but he doesn't even notice it. And once he gets to a place where he can grant everyone's wish, he just, Wonder Woman comes to the conclusion that she has to stop him for obvious reasons, because they don't know what the catch is, and they don't know how powerful this really is. And so she has to get him to renounce his wish like she had to renounce hers. And it's just a pretty powerful movie, but don't expect what you would expect from most superhero movies out of this one, because this one was very different. It wasn't as much of an action movie. It was more of a 1984 romance story. And it was still entertaining, don't get me wrong, but don't expect non-stop action is all I'm gonna say. Okay. And now, bear with me real quick. Now we're on number 7, which my pick for number 7 is The Way Back. And this movie starred Ben Affleck, who is pretty much a highly overrated actor. But the truth is, he pulled off this role really well. Let's be honest. This was a movie based on a true story. And it was about this recovering, he wasn't really recovering in the beginning, but he was an alcoholic. And this is kind of the story of how he led to recovery. And it is very inspiring. And I know multiple movie reviewers that are also recovering alcoholics, and they say that this movie was spot on. So I'm going to take their word for that and assume that that's spot on. And very entertaining. He was a high school basketball player. He was one of the best basketball players in a long time, and in that area, and he was his school's best ever. And he's an alcoholic. He's trying to deal with his son's cancer and his wife not being with him anymore. And it's very interesting because he's just non-stop drinking and cussing people out, and it leads to him being asked by his old high school to come back and coach, and he ends up saying yes. And these boys, from that school, let's just be honest, they sucked ass, okay? But they had great potential, and this great basketball player, he guides them into learning all of these things and how to be a good team and work together properly, and he doesn't do it in the traditional way either. He cusses them out a lot, which the Catholic school was not that happy about, let's just say. And eventually, when they found out about his alcohol problem, unfortunately, he was let go as coach, which I think was honestly a bad idea. I think they should have at least helped him recover first. But before they just were like, yep, you're out of here. But that's just my personal opinion. But this did lead to him making some good decisions. And I would say that this movie is definitely rewatchable, and it was a great movie, and I would highly recommend it, so please check it out. And now, we're going to number 6, which is Bad Boys for Life. This was one of the first movies that came out in 2020, and I believe it's still the highest grossing film of 2020. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure that's true. And this, of course, was the third film. It was supposed to be the fourth, but they never made the third. But yeah, it was the third film in the Bad Boys trilogy, and we get to see Will Smith and Martin Lawrence's characters all getting old, and Martin Lawrence is a granddaddy now, and they're just old cops at this point. And unfortunately, Will Smith gets shot. His character gets shot, and which leads to Martin Lawrence's character retiring, and Will Smith is just trying to avenge himself. That's his whole motive, which is interesting. I have to say, it's probably one of the most interesting storylines of this whole movie. And Martin Lawrence is out retiring and making really annoying his wife, doing crazy things and breaking stuff. And eventually Will Smith and Martin Lawrence's characters, they have to team up and to try to stop the guy who shot Will Smith. And his mom was, believe it or not, the kid that shot him was his son, and his mom is, of course, the only person he ever loved. And it's just very interesting. Weird witchcraft shit too that's just thrown in that mix. And yeah, check this out. Trust me, you won't regret it. But bringing us into the top 5 is Palm Springs, which is another streaming service movie. This was a Hulu movie of all things. And I checked it out because I was like, okay, that's J.K. Simmons, that's the chick from How I Met Your Mother, I'll check it out. And then I didn't check it out right away. And I found out that it was kind of like Groundhog Day, but different. And I was like, okay, I'll definitely check this out then. And it was a time loop movie, which was very interesting. They did a lot of experiments trying to figure out how to escape time loops. And we get to see these 3 characters. One played by the main character from Brooklyn Nine-Nine, which I don't watch that show, but that's a pretty popular show. And J.K. Simmons was in it, and there was also, of course, the mother from How I Met Your Mother. And these 3 characters that are all stuck in the time loop, of course, J.K. Simmons' character, has a smaller role, but he's just kind of in it too. And it's more of a story of how these 2 the main male lead and the main female lead kind of get closer together, let's just say. And it's a very long story, and it's an overall good flick, and I would check it out. Normally probably wouldn't be on this list if it was a normal year, but this wasn't a normal year, but I would still check this out. It was a good movie. Alright. Now in 4th place we have The Invisible Man, which if you know anything about The Invisible Man, he's invisible. And a very famous storyline, but this storyline was pretty different as a storyline. Instead of the man just being invisible, he had a suit that made him invisible, which made it very different. And you could see all these weird things that the Invisible Man decides to do, like stalking, killing, and it all gets blamed on the same person, and she's put in a psych ward, which is very interesting. And it's just very fascinating of a movie to watch, and I recommend it to literally anyone, because just the psychology behind all of it, and from the perspective of every character, is very spot on. With the psychology behind the Invisible Man, he's invisible, and of course he's going to do whatever he can, right, to try to stalk his old girlfriend. That's just what will go through his mind. And we get the main character, female. The psychology is very interesting behind why she's doing everything she does, because she knows it's not her, and she, of course, takes it in her own hands. And there's other side characters that their motives are very clear and very well done. And this is just a really good movie. Okay, but bringing us into the top 3 is Birds of Prey and the Fantabulous Emancipation of one Harley Quinn. That was a mouthful. Okay, this was the other DC movie that came out this year. This is, of course, a DC movie, like I just said. But it's what's interesting about this one is it's mainly told from this perspective of Harley Quinn. So it's a crazy person that was just dumped by her boyfriend. So it's very entertaining, to say the least, and a lot of very weird ways of telling the story, and a lot of backtracking and just crazy hyenas for no reason, and we get to see this big old team up, of course, with Harley Quinn and the Birds of Prey, and well, what eventually becomes the Birds of Prey, at least. And it's just a movie that I recommend any of you all to watch, because it is hilarious, it is epic, and it is entertaining, and the action scenes are not like a typical superhero movie, because it's not like they're fighting a big CGI army. It's just like kind of actual people, them just beating up. And Black Mask does a great job as the main villain. And so, seriously, watch this movie. Yeah, in second place, we have Underwater, which this was not, I don't know how to say this, but I really don't know how to say this. Let's just say, I really don't know how to describe this movie. It was very different from any movie I've ever seen, and it was a great adventure movie. There was all these people at the bottom of the ocean, and this accident happens that has them do all these crazy things just to try to survive, and they all have to work together, and unfortunately lose some of their friends in the process. And if you like adventure movies, this is the adventure movie to watch. And if you like action movies, this is a good action movie. Anyone that likes adventure movies and action movies should watch this movie. And I was not expecting this to be good. I'm just gonna make that clear. I just figured, okay, it's a movie, I'll watch it. And I was absolutely stunned by this movie. It was fantastic. And I believe it was Jonah Hill. He was in the movie, and his character was just hilarious. And I recommend it. Okay. Now, before we reveal my final pick, I would like to just tell you all a little bit more about 2020 and the streaming service, because the truth is streaming services are going to be a much larger role in the entertainment industry from now on, which is another reason why I'm wearing this shirt. But in streaming services this year, we have been treated with the second season of The Mandalorian. We have been treated with probably more movies than the theaters. I did not do an official count, so don't quote me. And just a lot. And I'd just like to recommend some things based on each streaming service. I have Netflix, as you can tell, and I would recommend on Netflix to watch probably the best Netflix show are probably Stranger Things and Cobra Kai. I would definitely check those out. And I also have Disney Plus. I would check out The Mandalorian. I have HBO Max, as mentioned earlier. I would check out The Flight Attendant and Young Justice, which is not technically a Max original, but it's going to be. Next season's gonna eventually be. And I just like to say this because I would like you all to kind of check out some cool stuff on streaming services, because they're gonna take over entertainment. That's my theory I'm calling right now after how 2020 went. But keeping that short, I'm gonna move on to my top pick, which was Extraction. And this one was probably the biggest shocker. It was on Netflix. A Netflix movie ended up being my #1 pick for this year. That never happens. I think the best a Netflix movie has ever done is from my perspective was last year. And Six Underground was pretty high up on my list, which I think it was only like 6 or 7 or 8 on the list. And this one ended up being the best movie I saw this year. Keep in mind, I've only seen just under 30 films though this year. So there could be other movies, like I heard Tenet was much better. I haven't seen that yet. But check out Extraction. It stars Chris Hemsworth, and it's just non-stop action flick on Netflix. And he's trying to transport this kid from basically just, that's basically the whole plot. You don't really need to know all that stuff. He's trying to transport this kid, and everyone's after him. And it's just non-stop action. Action does not stop, and it is absolutely entertaining. And I don't know how anyone that likes action movies couldn't like this movie, because this is an action flick if there ever was one. I'm not saying it's the best one ever out, but it's definitely a good action flick. So check it out. This is BS Ratings. See you next time.